friends, and welcome to the School Librarian Learning Network podcast. I'm Steve Tatro, also known as Dr. T Loves Books, and I love talking about all things related to school libraries. I may be an old dog, but I'm always trying to learn new tricks. That's why in each episode of the SLLN podcast, I'll chat with a school librarian about a lesson, program, or activity they love. Hopefully, this can be a place for school librarians to get ideas and find new ways to engage with their students and staff. As a good friend likes to say, we're better together. So I hope this podcast will help school librarians connect with and learn from each other. The opinions and ideas shared in this podcast by myself and my guests are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. And because school librarians always strive to be good digital citizens, I cite sources when using material that is not my own. Without further ado, let's get to this week's episode.
Hey everybody, we are back. It's been a little bit, but we are back and down among them, and I am here with a new friend, and I'm excited to talk to this new friend of mine because we've both got some stuff in common, and she's got some great ideas that she's going to share with us. Gwen Blumberg, welcome. I'm so glad you could be here with us. Thank you so much. Why don't you take a second, tell folks a little bit about, my pleasure. Tell folks a little bit about who you are, where you're at.
Sure. My name is Gwen Blumberg, and I am a first-year librarian just outside of Boston in the community of Lincoln. It's a K-8 school. I've actually been in the district for a number of years. I first worked there as a reading interventionist and then a literacy coach, and then I served for 8 years as the district literacy coordinator, and this is my first year as the K-8 school librarian.
That is a really interesting trajectory. I mean, I see all the literacy tied together, but
absolutely
that you were looking at it sort of like from a coordinator perspective and then moving into the school library is a little bit different. How did that transition happen?
Yeah. I should also say prior to being in the district that I am, I taught first grade in another district for 4 years, and I also taught fourth and fifth grade in New York as a classroom teacher. So I've had this journey as, a classroom teacher. I was also an adjunct professor in the mix in there.
Wow.
And then from being a reading specialist to a literacy coach and then to that leadership position, I think what's really important to know about all of my work is that there's been this through line. So even though my roles have changed over time, I have always been incredibly passionate about literacy and reading and writing and making sure that kids have the skills that they need to read, the skills that they need to tell their own stories, and that they're seeing their lives represented in books and being able to share their own stories in the stories that they write. So I feel like my passion has stayed true all the time, but I also feel like I'm constantly trying to just explore it through different lenses. And in my last role as the literacy coordinator, while I think that was really important work, it was just taking me further and further and further away from children and being able to actually do the work and have those relationships with kids. And I was just honestly really missing that and looking for how do I still instill a love of books and learning without ever working directly with kids. And so just thinking about what's that next step for me? Being a librarian just seemed like the perfect thing. And so I started taking, I thought, let me take some classes. Let me see how this will go. And then I feel like it's kind of lucky the librarian at the school where I was announced she was retiring. And it was okay, here's my chance. Let's go.
Fate. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
awesome.
Exactly. Yeah.
Huh. Man, yeah, I'm right there with you with the importance of literacy and getting kids to want to read. I was an English teacher for 23, 24 years before I moved into the school library. So I'm right there with you. And I've got to say, the school library, it never even occurred to me as a career choice until our school librarian said, I might be retiring in a couple of years. And is this something you'd be interested in? And I was like, why did this never occur to me? And now that I'm in it, it's just like you're saying, it's the perfect sort of combination.
It's the best.
To my mind, the school library is what the whole school should be. Kids are there because they want to be there. They're finding the things they're interested in. They're pursuing their interests. And that's why are we not doing that all over the place? But that's a whole other conversation.
I know, right? It's the best. And I'm fortunate that I knew the librarian whose role that I had to go through the whole process, was not a shoe-in kind of thing. I had to interview and do the demo lessons and everything. But after I was hired, the librarian later on, she actually gave me a hug and said, like, I always knew you were a librarian. And that was just was like, just filled my bucket, like just filled me to the tip top with coziness. And I'm like,
That's so wonderful.
I think that she's right. Like, I feel joy. This is my first year and I feel a joy every day in this role. So I'm really happy. I'm just really happy. And I'm so excited to talk about this with you.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and I want to dwell for a second on the fact that this is your first year, because I'm a pretty new school librarian too. Like, I went into the library and for some reason, I have trouble remembering the exact when it was, but it was only in January 22 that I stepped into the library space for the first time. And so there's been a lot of stuff that has gone on between now and then, but I mean, still kind of figuring out, like, my library space, my middle school didn't have a library space until a year ago, December. So I was working out of a different space and trying to connect kids with books and stuff. So, like, even as a new librarian, I'm now a new librarian, because now I've got a new space that I'm trying to get up and set up and run. So, like, I think you and I are really coming from this from a very, we don't know what we don't know, and we're enjoying the process as we go.
Yes. Absolutely. And, like you said, talk about another conversation, like the whole idea of the space and how the space, it's like there's the kids, there's the books, there's the teaching, and then there's the physical space of it as well. And I find that to be super exciting. And so I think that's kind of cool that you get to, like, you know a little bit more, and then you get to go back and revisit, what is that as you define a learning space.
Yeah. And that's one of the great things that I've been enjoying, is kind of figuring out, okay, this isn't working, so let's try something else. Oh, this worked really well. Let's see how we can adapt that more and get more of that going on. So I'm sure you're kind of seeing those kinds of things as well as you're, playing around with different kinds of stuff.
100%. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And I love that you were willing to come and share, even though this is just your first year in the library, because I sometimes I think a lot of people feel like, well, what I do isn't special. What I do isn't cool. What I do, I'm not one of those all-star people that you see every, article is about this person or that person. And that's not, in my mind, that's not what school librarianship is about. It's not about being a rock star. It's not about, like, are you published in 1900 places? It's about, do you love what you're doing? And you love what you're doing, and you love it so much that you're willing to share with others, which I think is so wonderful and so important that we do that.
I agree. The community that's especially when you're the only one of you in your building. I mean, I'm lucky there's another full-time librarian in my district, but, you can be kind of like a little bit of a unicorn in some places. And I experienced that as a literacy coordinator, and I was the only one in the district. So I quickly learned, especially during the pandemic, how much I needed other people like me to talk to and bounce ideas off of and to share resources. And I became very close with my literacy leader network. We're still very close. And I will say that they happen to all be women. Those women sent me flowers and a picture book when I was hired for this job, because they knew how much it meant to me. And we just became so close, and we are still very close. So we actually met through a Bluesky chat, you and I, and, and so it was like, I'm new, I need more people. And I'm also trying out this new social media platform. Like, how do I rebuild the network that I had as a literacy coordinator? How do I build that kind of network over again? Because we're stronger together. And I am very much like, we should be sharing. Why should everyone be creating everything on their own? I think that's just silly,
Yeah.
And we can just like grow each other's ideas, so we can have more time to spend with kids. So yay, sharing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, it's funny. I've been in education for quite a while. And as an English teacher, once in a while I'd share something with a colleague, but I feel like school librarians bring sharing to a whole other level. Like, people are so generous and so friendly and so willing to say, like, here's a thing I tried that didn't work, but maybe if you tweak it, it'll work. And, just like, everybody's always willing to give you their materials or give you their ideas. And it's such a caring community for each other as well as for the students in the profession. So it's been a really wonderful home to sort of settle into the past couple of years. So welcome.
Yeah.
Now, you had mentioned at some point that you have been bouncing around from different levels, different grade levels and stuff too. And now you're in a K-8, right?
Correct.
Okay.
That's
so
correct.
You're the librarian for all the kids K?
I am. So what I do is I have a teaching load. I teach library classes for kindergarten through 5th grade. And 6 through 8 do not have an assigned library time. So they can come in, and there's kids coming in. That's one of the things that's really surprised me about the library. It's just like how hopping that place is all day long. So even when I don't have a library class, there's kids coming in and out all day long to exchange books and so forth. So 6-8 does not have designated library times. So I've had to try to find different ways to get to those kiddos. And so one of the things that I did was I have the library open during recess time, and I have had as many so we have a grade 5, 6, and a 7-8. Like they have they're broken into 2 pieces. But I think I've had my max is 104 middle school kids in one day, not all at one time, but in those 2 separate blocks. So the library, can be a really hop-in place for middle school kids. And that is not a, you have to, a shush kind of, I'm not the library should be quiet kind of librarian.
Yeah.
I actually don't know that many people who are those kind of librarians. I feel like that's just such a stereotype.
Yeah.
Some kids are coming to read, and I have a lot of board games. It's a screen-free zone unless the kiddos have specific permission for me to be on screens, and I can actually see where they are because I have a very large space, and with that many kids, I just want to make sure everything's, all good. Lots of kids, lots of board games. I also have a lot of Legos and blocks and magnetiles and things like that. And the middle school kids do that. I'm thinking of one 8th grade boy who doesn't come out all the time, but he comes periodically, and he pulls those Legos out and he sits there and he builds. So I try to have make a space for the middle school kids to hang, collaborate, all of those other type of life skills that we want them to do as far as becoming communicators and those types of things. And I am noticing that some of those kids are asking for book recommendations. So is everyone checking out a book? No. But are a lot of kids feeling like it's a cool place to be in the library? Yes. And that is my goal. I'm also spending a lot of time right now trying to kind of pour a lot of energy into the 6th graders because those kids are just coming off of remembering what it was like to have library class. And so those kids are very aware of what's different in the library. It looks very different than last year. Just naturally, of course, I'm a different person than the last librarian. And I've talked to my administration and so those 6th graders will become 7th graders and then become 8th graders. So in a couple of years, I'll know the whole school and I'll know them well. And I'm really excited about that.
Yeah. It's got to be quite a challenge kind of managing such a wide range of grade levels and ability levels and skill levels. That's a lot going on.
Yes, it is. And I'm finding I'm doing a lot of weeding of the collection right now. And the collection that I inherited was very much split in a lot of ways, nonfiction for youngers, nonfiction for olders, which, that was working for no disrespect. Every librarian has their way of doing things. But for me, that is just not feeling like the most efficient way to do things. So I'm kind of putting things back together and then weeding and what do I have and what are kids asking for? That is challenging, I think, to be how in that space, not wanting to deny it all, you can't have that but knowing that, wow, what's appropriate for a 1st grader, and what an 8th grader might want, so it's just, and I hate to use that word appropriate, because there's choice and all of those kinds of things. But let's just face it, there's a big difference developmentally between a 1st grader and an 8th grader. And if you're in a K-5, I know that even K-5 librarians struggle between what the kindergarten kiddos want versus 5th graders want. So in a K-8, that's just magnified.
Absolutely. We've got some tensions about what goes in 4-6 versus 7-8, what goes in 5-6 versus 7-8. And I can't imagine then having to take that and divide it down even into K1, 2, 3. There's so many gradations there. And like you said, appropriate, I try not to use the word appropriate generally, but just the developmental relevancy of so many of those materials is going to be so vastly different for those kids. So I don't envy you that challenge. I will say that.
Yeah. And I feel like there's also things that are in the collection, this are older. It's like things from 20 years ago, books look different, and, because things are screens and we have so many more images, so like things that are very text heavy, even though the content might be, at the reading level or the type of information that the older kids might want, they want things with images in them. So there's just all kinds of things in there. And I feel like that is, I'm so passionate about books, and I was purchasing books for the district for reading purposes. So I have, some idea about how that goes. But that's just a very, very, very labor intensive process.
I bet.
Yeah.
Can't even wrap my mind around it. Just trying to imagine it. I'm just like, nope, I'm out. So Gwen, you are in your first year in this space, but you are working on really helping your students kind of navigate that space. And you're talking about how you've got to think about your materials, but also you're helping them to build up sort of their independence. You're helping them to figure out how do they find what they're looking for? How do they take part in the library as a space and as an activity, as a thing for them to be a part of? So what are how did you sort of lead your students into kind of understanding what's going on with your space now that this is sort of, you've stepped into this space?
Sure. So one of the first things that I did, and I actually did this past summer, and I did it with the other librarian in my district, is we use Follett Destiny as our LMS. And we were using both schools were using, do you know that, Steve? Is that what you use, Follett?
We used Follett for a bit. We are now using Accessit.
Okay.
I prefer it, but that's what we're working with right now.
Okay. So we used Follett, and we were using the more traditional display. So not a lot of images, just not very visually appealing. And what I was just saying about like the visual appeal that is so important to kids. So the librarian, I learned about this in one of my graduate classes about Destiny Discover, where we had to do a project about different LMSs. And so I really wanted to flip to using Destiny Discover. So I did that over the summer with the librarian in our other K-8 school. And so I was like, this is great. The kids are going to love this. Like one of the things that I need to do in the early on is show the kids like how to use this tool. So as I rolled that out, which the kids were excited by what it looked like, that they could see recently added titles, the most popular titles, all of those different kinds of things, it became clear to me very quickly that the kids didn't really have a strong grasp of, once they could even look something up in the catalog. And, there's other things that happened prior to that, but I'm kind of like plopping us in the middle of this, like what exactly was a call number? How do you read a call number? Where might that thing be in the library? And then where do you find it? And so I found that all kids need that, but particularly like thinking about that grade 3 through 5 zone, which is, where the kids can, they're much more independent in being able to do those things. When they wanted something, I had to like run around and help them find it. So I thought I have got to start to grow these skills in kiddos so that to increase their independence and increase their engagement, and not just for their time with me in the library, but these are like today and everyday skills. So maybe, another library isn't organized like that, but it's all about, this is what we do. Like we teach kids how to find things. So I started to think about like a trajectory of like, what do my kids need to even know? So instead of sharing one lesson plan today, I was going to kind of just share with you like the series of steps that I went through to try to increase independence in my kids. So the first thing I said is like, it was almost like I did a little pretest, but I didn't mean to, like I learned like, wow, like we need to shore this up. So I learned like the kids need to know alphabetical order. So once they could find something, like their alphabetical order skills were not as strong as they needed to be. So, I found a funny book about alphabetical order, totally fictitious, and, did that as a read aloud, and they loved it. Like even 5th graders, they love that silly stuff.
Absolutely.
If you create the type of atmosphere where it's okay to be silly. And so I started with that. I had some very basic smartboard lessons that I made, just like dragging things into order. And the 5th graders, for example, like it's not that they didn't have any skills for this. It just was not super solid. And also kids aren't using dictionaries the way we did when you and I We're
Definitely
kids.
not.
You don't need to do that
Mm-hmm.
anymore. I had created some smartboard lessons. I used alphabet strips that the kids could use. I then quickly made little stacks of books that I pulled off of the shelves, and I differentiated those types of stacks. So some stacks would have like an A, a B, a C, a D, and an E. And some would have like A and then 3 books with S, with a different second letter, a different third letter, so I had different kind of differentiated stacks based on what I was quickly learning about the kids. I made little sets of popular book characters, in alphabetical order and had them lay them down, lay them on the floor. Now your partner has another stack, and if I saw kids were doing well with that, I'd be like, put your stacks together. So just trying to really get them to do different reps and flex those muscles so that they could quickly, and I would tell them like, alphabetical order is not the end game here. And I think that's really important with kids is that they know, like, why am I doing this somewhat abstract thing? It's so that when you want a book, you'll know where to go, that Rick Riordan is going to come before, well after Sharon Draper instead of, going, kids were painstakingly going shelf by shelf by shelf by shelf going down. And that's not efficient.
Yeah. And it's funny because like so many times, and I've got middle schoolers and they have a hard time figuring out where is this going to be on the shelf when I'm looking for Tolkien. Why am I not looking at the first shelf? Like, because we've got an alphabet. Like it's a skill that needs reinforcement. And it's something I have found. And I mean, I kind of knew this as a teacher, but when I was teaching English, like I knew there were certain things that I had to cover. Like it was in my curriculum. In the library, there's not really a curriculum. So I see a much broader sort of set of skills and knowledge and abilities. And I am constantly finding myself going, how do you not know that? And having to readjust and say, okay, they don't know this. So take a step back. And how do we make this more user-friendly
how do I
for
teach them? And 100%. And I think like the more we can make it fun. And I think it's really important. The kids know, like, why am I doing this? And, for my time as a literacy coordinator, like I was always, when I was working with teachers saying like, it's today and every day. Like I'm teaching you this skill. It's like today and every day. It's important that we are today and every day. So I try to approach that with the library, as well, because it's not their fault if they don't know something. Well, it's like we have to teach them. And we just have to think about like this continuum of like, how do we scaffold that? Like, how do we give kids like lots and lots of reps to do things? I was called like shots on net. How do we let them take multiple shots on net, multiple ways of doing the same kind of thing? So it's like that alphabetical order, like I'm putting these little character cards in order. I'm putting a stack of books in order. Oh, there's this really cool game, this shelver game that another librarian shared with me. Speaking of sharing librarians and like that, you can like put the little books in order and you can check that. So like, lots of different ways to do the same kind of thing.
And
I also
that's
tried
another
to
thing.
talk.
So I hate to interrupt, but I'm going to jump in real quick because that's one of the things that I love about the library too, is that I feel like most classrooms, you don't have the time and the luxury of giving the kids multiple opportunities over and over and over again to try a thing without them getting a grade, without them getting an assessment on it, without them, this is your last chance to do this because we've got to move on to our next thing. And the library kind of gives you that opportunity to say like, okay, you didn't get it this way. That's okay. Let's readjust and we'll figure out a different way to go at this. And really kind of takes that pressure, that expectation of you should already know XYZ when you walk in the door and you should be picking up ABC to go with it. And if you don't, then you're messing up and you're going to get a bad grade. Like, and just take all that away and just say like, okay, you don't know this. And I love that you said, when they don't know something, that's not their fault. And that's on us to say, okay, great, let's figure this out then. And I feel sometimes, especially, and I work in a school that has a lot of veteran teachers who've been there for quite a while. And so I more often than not will hear, I had to teach them this thing again, or, oh my gosh, how do they not know this? Why am I spending time on this? And like, again, I get it. You've got this a certain amount of time. You've got a finite amount of classroom minutes, and you're trying to get through all this curriculum stuff. But I feel like we're really doing students a disservice when we, A, assume that they should know stuff, and B, when we get grouchy with them for not knowing stuff, because that's just turning them off. Like, if you come at them and like, geez, you're dumb for not knowing this, kid. Well, do you think they're going to yeah, are they going to be interested in picking that skill up? No, absolutely not.
No.
So giving them those as many opportunities as they need, I think, is such a wonderful part of the library world that we can just, okay, didn't work, great, let's figure out a new thing.
Yeah. And something I'm thinking about is you're saying that, like, there's two things. Like, I just think, like, what a privilege that, like, the kiddos that I have, like my kindergarten kids this year, you know, I'm going to be your librarian. I hope, you know, the whole time you're at this school, like, I'm going to get to watch these kids grow. And you know what? So, like, I've got a third grader, you know, or a couple third graders, you know, like, they're having trouble with this. That's okay. Like, we'll work on it. Like, we'll keep working on it. So, you know, there isn't that time pressure, and that I get to work with them over time. And it's just so funny when you said that, like, what do you mean you don't know this? I feel like I got the gift of learning this very early on in my career, because my first year teaching, I taught fourth grade, and then the next year I looped. So I had those kids for 2 years. And there would be times in fifth grade when I'd be going over something and they'd be like, what? I never learned this. And I was like, guys, dudes, I was your teacher. And so it's like, just because you've taught it doesn't mean that they remember it, because you think about, like, all the things that are coming at them so quickly, you know, like, and we don't remember everything as adults either. So I just feel like I always can go back to that. You know, it was a very long time ago, but, you know, when I'd be like, you know, I actually I read you that book. Yeah.
I am the
like,
one that
how
did
many
that
other
with you.
things did they, but like, how many other things did they do? And so, so just like, I really think it's a privilege that, like, I'll get to be a part of these kids' lives. I love that when I was a literacy coach, you know, that same kind of thing, you know, I'm demoing lessons in kindergarten classrooms, and, you know, I would get to know those kids all the way up. And, like, that's one of the things that I really missed, is that I would see kids in the hallway and think, like, I don't know who that kid is. And that kid has absolutely no idea who I am. And I really wanted to be an active part of kids' lives.
Yeah. Well, and it's a little bit of a tangent, but since we're kind of talking about, like, the kids remembering stuff from year to year, I have to wonder if our current students are not facing a really much more uphill battle than we did when we were their age, because I was recently reading some stuff about how we need time when our brain is not engaged with something. We need boredom in order for our brain to remember stuff. Like, that being bored is part of the process of putting stuff into your long-term memory. And I feel like so many of our kids these days are constantly on a phone, in a game, doing a thing, and they don't know what boredom is. They can't handle boredom. And so I wonder, like, it's going to be really interesting to see in a couple of years if we did a couple of studies on how much can you remember now versus a couple of years from now. I have a feeling a lot of our students right now are going to really struggle with remembering those earlier pieces of information that should have transferred into long-term memory and maybe didn't make it there. So I think this conversation about how we have to think about what do they know and do we need to reteach stuff, because I think that's going to be a much bigger part of the job going forward.
I think so too. And I also think it's really important too that, like, we think about, like, thinking about how it was when we were kids, and that, like, longing for, like, some people, like, oh, the good old days, like that kind of thing. It's like, is it engaging, you know? And it's like, are we making things engaging and that make kids want to learn and that are motivating and exciting? Because kids that are having fun are learning, and we know that learning is going to stick a lot more. So, like, making it a game versus, like, kill and drill and, you know, like, those kinds of things. Like, honestly, like, I probably didn't stick for us either, but we, you know, just, like, I think there was much more of an emphasis on compliance, you know, and compliance over engagement. And so, like, you know, when I say, like, not a silent library, like, I think the libraries were probably pretty silent, you know, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, there was much more of a, like, desks in rows, compliance, that type of a mindset. And, you know, thankfully, I think, like, that's not how we want. I think there's probably, you know, there's still pockets of places that are like that, you know, and there's different styles and so forth. But, like, the more engaging and hands-on and fun and play-based, and I think the more things are going to get into kids' long-term memories. That's just my 2 cents.
Oh, I think you're totally, I'm right there with you. We're singing, you're singing to the choir on this one, preaching to the choir on this one.
Yeah.
But sorry, I have derailed us terribly. So we're going to swing it back around here.
Yeah. So I want to go, please.
Nope, that's all you.
I was going to say, so if we go back to what I was just saying about like play-based and games, so like those are some of the basic skills that I wanted to set out to teach the kids right away. Like, how do I look something up? How do I, what is alphabetical order? I started teaching kids like call numbers, and I would say like, I called it the not so secret code of the library, and like teaching them all those little things, and like, oh, you can crack the code. And like, once you know that, like we made it in like the sleuthy kind of thing. And the kids thought that was really fun. And then I started doing a lot of text set work with kids. So for example, and I would try to use like multimodal text sets as well. So like I might have read the book, Jerry Changed the Game, about, one of the person who developed cartridges that could go into game systems. And there was also a doodle for Google about him. And like, can we watch a video about Jerry? I'm reading you this book about Jerry. And then I'm starting to teach the kids about like the classification system, very big buckets, so putting that up, on the screen and being like, if I wanted to find more books about games, like where do you think they might be? And kids saying like, oh, I think they'll be in the 300s. I think they'll be in the 500s, and why that, like why? But then instead of just telling them, saying, okay, pull out Destiny Discover. I want you to search for games. I want you to scan the call numbers. What are you starting to notice? And they're like, oh, I'm starting to see like this and this. I'm like, well, go check on the shelf. So making it an inquiry, making it an explanation, like an activity, an exploration. So now they know where the games are. They've now learned about the classification of games. They've also learned about this really cool software developer. They've learned about the biography call number, so all of those different kinds of things, like through using a text set. I did a similar thing like Snowflake Bentley, like we learned about his life. We learned about what that call number was. We looked at his actual book of snowflakes, where might that be, and then that day, we made something out of snowflakes and, Kiva blocks just to keep things like really fun. And that was an idea that I saw online. So trying to get kids up and moving, and instead of just like thinking about like that wah kind of lecture, this is where you find it, like, how can I find something that's interesting and match it together? So that's been my goal, in thinking about like how this whole progression kind of fleshed out, Is everyone a master at that yet? No, but like, are they so much better and stronger? They are. And can I tell you what the culminating activity was?
Please.
Yeah. So I got this idea from another librarian, like you said, like we'd love to share. I met a librarian named Gigi McAllister. We both write for an organization called Choice Literacy. So I met her at a writing retreat this summer and was just like so excited to be there with another librarian. And so every now and then she'll send me a note like, oh, I tried this great thing. So Gigi sent me this idea about the scavenger hunt that she did with her kids. And I'm like, this is it. This is the culminating activity. Oh, I'm also, I should say, I'm very, very fortunate. I have a full-time library assistant who is just an amazing human and a partner. And so she's just wonderful. I asked her if she, I'm like, I've got this idea. And so what we did is found a list of books and she took it a step. Like I gave her the idea. I want a list of books. I want to put the names of the books on index cards. And then the kids are going to have to use the catalog, look up the books, find the call number, and then go find the books on the shelf. This was Gigi's idea. And inside the book, there's going to be a sheet of stickers, and the kids will take a sticker and put it on their sheet. Well, ta-da. Well, Jennifer, my assistant, who is amazing, she took it like another step. And so she found like 35 books, but you couldn't tell what they were based on the title, which was so brilliant of her. So like narrative, nonfiction biographies, fiction books that sounded like nonfiction and from all the different areas of the library. So I did that with fifth graders. I didn't do it with all the grades yet because the other kids need some more time with those foundational skills. My gosh, these fifth graders were so excited about this. I had a little stack of note cards, and I said, I want you to find 3. I had kids that found 20 books. It was bananas. They were so excited. I need another card. I had kids come in during recess time. Can I still do the cards? They were so excited. It was like so cool because they were having fun. But really what they were learning by doing that obviously was like, they looked something up in the catalog. They had to think, how do I read that call number? Where is that in the library? They had to use alphabetical order. They had to find it. They had to, how do we, pull it off the shelf, put it back on, like all of those little tiny nuts and bolts kind of things that you need to know. So that was really exciting. So that was like the progression in terms of, for me, thinking about, strengthening those skills. And, like, I'm sure that maybe there's probably more senior librarians who are like, yep, like I've done it. But for somebody, brand new, like that's my trajectory. Like what did I learn? And then how did I scaffold that? And then at the end, like, how was I able to, I didn't test it. It's not a grade, but I could see the excitement and the engagement in the kiddos and like who actually needed help. Like there were a lot of kids who were like, I can't find this, and it was like, why couldn't they find it? Was it somebody had put the book back on the wrong shelf, or were they looking in the wrong area? So it was like such a good way to gather informal anecdotal data to help guide me in my next steps. And like that I can even pull, just like we do with reading and writing skills that need shoring up. Like I can pull a little small group, be like, hey, let's dive into like what this means. How can I help support you?
Yeah.
With that, and more game-based ways to do that.
It's awesome. Man, I love the hands-on.
So
anytime we can get the kids. Fun. Yeah. I mean, clearly the kids were digging it, that they were coming in on recess to engage in this more.
I know. I love it. I say to some of those kids, I'm like, this is so much nerdy library love. And they know when I say like nerdy, that like that is like a huge compliment. I'm like, I love all this nerdy library love. Like, bring it.
So awesome. And it's funny, literally just before we jumped on this chat, I had seen somebody had posted about, they were talking about the card catalog effect. And they were saying how like back in their day, you'd have to, look it up in the card catalog, and sort of do that. You had to know, what is my topic? And then when you looked it up, you had to know, okay, where do I find this call number that's on here? And then you go to the call number and you find the book, and you got to look through the book and find the information. And most of the time, that book didn't even have what you really needed, but you were able to look at the books around it and go, oh, these books are sort of about the same topic. So let me see. And maybe the book didn't have what I needed, but it's got some other ideas for what I should be looking for. And our students kind of have lost a lot of that sort of synchronicity of happening to find or, coming across the things that they didn't know they needed. Because now it's just, I go straight to the thing. I look it up in a computer. The computer tells me, and there's the answer, and I'm done. Instead,
it's much more efficient. It's much more efficient. That's true. But it's also less. It's not peeling that onion.
Yes. And what you're doing
the
with
discoveries
them,
along the way.
Stuff. Yeah. You're bringing them into that discovery. Like you're getting them to talk about, why would this be in this section? Let's go see if we can find it. Look and see. Like that's just such, it's good instruction, but it's so wonderful that your students are getting this opportunity to sort of explore the library and understand, not just like, here's a skill you're going to learn because you need it for the library. And instead they're sort of exploring why this matters and how this impacts them directly when they go looking for information. So wonderful. I love that you're doing that, man. Love it. Love it.
Oh, thanks for giving me a chance to talk about it. You can see like, I get all like nerded. Like I said, nerdy is a good thing. Like it's so exciting.
Absolutely.
And I just like, as you were talking about the card catalog, so we can be like, oh, like you did not think that was awesome when we were kids.
No.
But now, like when you say card catalog, like all these like, oh, what I wouldn't give for one of those,
Yeah.
I actually found a card tucked in a book that was in my collection that was so old. It was the actual card. And I was like, look at this. So it's like so funny. We have like nostalgia for this thing that was, it was hard to do those things. But yeah, it did create this like web. It like taught you like a habit of mind.
Yeah. And
for sure,
kind of helped you learn how the library was organized and arranged and why it was organized and arranged that way. Like you kind of had to figure it out almost on your own. Like if you weren't having good library instruction, they might say, go to the catalog, look it up, and then figure it out.
I know, right?
And it was sort of like
I don't know how to spell a word. We'll look it up. And you're like, but pachyderm, how do I,
Yeah.
I
Man, well, I love how you are really helping your students gain that independence and engaging them with the library space and helping them see the importance of these skills and having them actually use the skills rather than just saying, here's the skill. Maybe 6 months from now, you'll use it. No. We're going to use it right now. We're going to take advantage of this. So that's awesome. It really does warm my heart to hear how fortunate these students are that they're getting this kind of engagement and instruction. So on their behalf, I thank you because it's really wonderful that you're doing this. So clearly your students have been getting a lot out of this, that they're coming back. And I'm just kind of curious, have you gotten any feedback from any of the teachers about the students taking part in the library since you've stepped in?
I have. It's been really wonderful, that there's been a big physical change in the library. Like I moved the furniture around. I was able to ask the district at the end of last year when there was, sometimes there's end of year funds. We did not have a snowy year last year, and very different than this winter. But in one of my classes, we had to do a library redesign, including we had to make a scale floor print, and we were supposed to use an older library, but I got permission to do the library in my school for my professor. And so I redesigned the library. My library, this is its third year. So we had a building renovation redesign. And so some of it was renovated and some of it was added on. So my library is actually a brand new space, and it is very large, and it was very empty. There just was not a lot. It was not cozy. So like I said, the first thing the kids noticed, I was able to get some new, really super engaging, not all new, but a couple of really important pieces, and also think about back to that K-8 discussion. Like I got some high tops, and those are only for middle school kids. So the first thing is that kids notice that change, and features of the older kiddos were coming and saying the kids really love the space. They love the space. And kids were giving me that type of feedback as well.
That's awesome.
But it's been really nice to have the kids kids don't have filters oftentimes. They just tell you we don't like this or we like this. The kids by and large have been really happy. And I've had a couple of really nice notes from families telling me how much their kids love the library. And, those are gold, when you get a note like that, those are just gold. And that just means so much. So
definitely laminate those, put them in a file so that when your admins come through, you can be like,
you have a bad day.
Did I leave these out?
Yeah.
Oh, so sorry. I left those on the desk so you could see them.
But it's there can be 100 good things. And as educators, we'll focus on the one thing that's bad. So I feel like that's something that comes with time too, to know okay, this is one thing. So I'm taking a really long time to answer your question in that, yes, the kids do seem happy. And I have kids and grownups have been telling me about that. The fifth graders do a journalism unit. And I had so many kids coming and interviewing me about the library this year and writing pieces about the library. And that felt so great, that they wanted to have that be the thing that they wanted to write their feature article about.
That's awesome.
Especially because as the former literacy coordinator, I knew what that unit was about, and what the goals for that unit were. So to know that they wanted to come back and have that be the topic, that's so cool. It's just really neat. And it's really neat to see too, as the former literacy coordinator, who really believes in choice and voice and agency and all of those things in kiddos, to see how much kids do love books and love to read. And I'm that's a result of families who are doing that work at home with their kids, but also the rich experiences that our teachers are giving kids, and that nobody does any of this stuff in a vacuum, that readers, it takes a lot of people to grow a reader, and not just the skills that kids need, but that love of reading and the ability to talk about books and have a reading identity. It's really neat. It's just so neat to see it all together. I feel so grateful. I feel really grateful.
Yeah. Oh man, it's so great. I'm kind of curious, in doing the lessons that you've been doing, you would I think you kind of touched on this, but I'm just curious if there's any more detail that you might be able to share. You had sort of talked about how some of your students have more skills, some of them have fewer skills. And so you were able to pull different types of stacks of books for them to sort of look at in terms of sorting and figuring out what goes first, what goes second. I imagine as you're doing that kind of thing, that really lends itself really well to differentiating for not 100%. Just grades, but for students who might have, fewer
100%. Yes.
knowledge and skill.
Absolutely.
Do you have an ELL population or English language learners that you are doing this with?
We do not. We absolutely have English language learners. Not a large portion of our population, but we absolutely do. And so that's why I've tried to thinking about visuals that we have, like what I said, like the alphabet strip, which is going to be linked into the little resource, the page I'm going to give to you that you could share, so that everyone has access to that, not just certain kids, like everyone has access to that. How do we do that? And then thinking about some of my students, who have IEPs with specific goals, like this work is going to be easier if I focus it on a topic that I know you are interested in. So if I know, for example, that you are a big cat kind of person, then I can curate a little tiny text set for you of big cats, and I can have cheetah, lion, leopard. No, I might not even do lion and leopard, if we're only working on first letter, but that type of thing where I can tailor it to something that you're very interested in and that you're going to be excited about to get that engagement up. And some kids might have fewer books in their stack. And I tried to be really mindful when I did do fewer books in the stack that I chose fatter books so that the actual height of the stack, it wasn't like you get a little tiny stack and you get a big stack. It's like everybody's stack is kind of the same. And that it wasn't like everybody, just being mindful about the optics of those kinds of things, because kids absolutely know. And, or, a kiddo who might have more graphic novels, or I'm sure where you are too, like those are hot. Those are hot. So it's like a kid that is going to be more resistant to doing this task. Well, you can have graphic novels, and like you're going to do that with graphic novels in your set. And like, that's going to be cool because you're going to want to look at those. And obviously I wanted this to happen, but some kids, they would be doing that activity and they're like, can I check this book out? And I'm like, yes, so, then I would just have to make a mental note, like get another book into that stack. But like, that was part of that as well. Like kind of like a sneaky way to like, how do I get kids to touch more books or books that they might not touch on their own?
Yeah, man, I love that.
But definitely like lots of different ways to differentiate. And like I said, I'm always going to try to lead with engagement. Like, how can I make what's my skill? And then how can I make that engaging? How can I make kids want to do this?
Right. So this being your first year, this is your first go through on this. Are there any things that as you went through it, you were like, note for next time, I got to remember to XYZ, like anything that sort of was a good reflection moment to say, you know what, we make a little adjustment here next time around?
Yeah, I feel like I'm doing that all the time. And I love that that's like, when you have 3 sections of a grade level. So when you see, sometimes 4, 3 or 4, depending on the grade level, the first time you do it, I'm like, that didn't go very well. Like I can tweak it for the next one. I can tweak like, okay, I went to the third letter too fast on this one, tweak. So I feel like I'm constantly like tweaking and, taking notes. I've got a pretty elaborate spreadsheet about like what I teach and like little notes for myself about how to make it better. So I feel like that's just a constant ongoing thing. And I feel grateful that comes from having been a teacher for a long time. And so that I'm not having to become a new librarian and a new teacher all at the same time, and not like, oh, I'm the best teacher in the world. I'm not saying that, but like, I'm a very reflective practitioner, and as someone who's led that kind of work, a lot of my organizational systems and structures, like I have a lot of those in place, and I'm just layering like what the content is. And just what I'm saying, like,
100%.
I'm like starting sometimes with, so let me say it this way in a more clear way. I'm starting from scratch with the content, but I have some systems and structures in place to help me manage that content.
Totally. No, that totally makes sense. So lots of stuff to think about. And you've got this amazing list of things that you have discussed with us that have got links to, here's how others can do this too. So if people want to sort of reproduce, this is great. I mean, this is such a wonderful share that you were doing here. So I think we are at the point where we're going to take a 90-degree turn and go into our book break.
Book break! Squiddy!
Yay!
I love the book break. Book. Yay! So any kind of book you want to share, personal, professional, whatever, for the students, for yourself, whatever you got. What are you bringing for us?
Oh my gosh. So I'm doing so many audiobooks. I'm listening to as many middle grade audiobooks as I can, because kids are coming to me for recommendations. And I want to be able to say, like, I've read this book. It's beautiful. It's lovely. And that is so exciting. A lot of kids want fantasy, and that is not my genre, I'm going to say. So I'm really pushing myself to read more fantasy. And so one of the books that I want to share is called Impossible Creatures by Katherine Rundell. I'm not all the way through yet, but if you could see it, like, first of all, it's just gorgeous.
That's
The
so
lettering
interesting.
It's so
Gwen
beautiful.
just held up the book and she's showing me the cover. And I literally this morning, one of my students had that book on a table across the library and I could see all these colors and I didn't know what the book was and I didn't get a chance to ask him. That's the book. That is so weird. That's the book.
It's so good. And so I started listening to it on audio, and it was one of those books that as I was driving, there were passages that I was like, literally made me catch my breath because the writing is so beautiful. And can I just read you like a couple of those? Do you mind?
Please. Go right ahead.
Right, so this is on page 59. It says, some sentences have the power to change everything. There are the usual suspects. I love you. I hate you. I'm pregnant. I'm dying. I regret to tell you that this country is at war. But the words with the greatest power to create both havoc and marvels are these. I need your help. My gosh. So this book has beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I'm going to read you one more. Can I?
Yeah, please.
Can I read you one more?
Yeah.
But Christopher didn't have the words then to explain what nonetheless he knew, that sometimes, if you are among the very lucky, a spark of understanding cuts like lightning across the space between two people. It's a defibrillator for the heart, and it toughens you, it nourishes you, and the word we've chosen for it, which is an insignificant word for being so abruptly upended in a new and finer place, is friendship. So it's this story about these mythical creatures that are, I just can't. And it's just, and then it has these poignant little like life proverbs sprinkled in. And the book itself is beautiful. The cover is beautiful. The paper on the edges is red and it's beautiful. The illustrations in the back about all of these different mythical creatures, which thank goodness some of them were there because I didn't know them. So I'm actually just loving this. And it's so good for me as someone who's like, fantasy. I'm absolutely loving this book. It's exciting to talk to kids about it. I actually have my library's copy right now because I'm on break so I can finish it. But when kids come in and say, I love that book, and to remind myself how important it is to push myself out. So that is my book break, Impossible Creatures. And the good news is that there's going to be another one. And we know how much kids love series. So
Absolutely.
Highly recommend.
Man, that is amazing. That's like such serendipity.
I love that you saw it. I know, right?
So strange, but so wonderful. Well, that's definitely going on the short list now. And now I've got something to talk to the student about too. So this is great.
And those little pieces of writing, like you got beautiful. And the whole book isn't like that. It's just like all of a sudden it just drops you into this, like I said, takes your breath away. It's just so beautifully written.
Man, all right. Well, that's going way up the list then. That's definitely on my short list now. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to come and sharing not just great activities and ideas and ways to help us get our students engaged and really connecting with the space, but also a great book that we obviously are going to need to all go and check out. So thank you so much. It's really wonderful of you to do this.
Thank you for having me. It's just like, I think I might have said like happy or joy so many times during this time. Like, I'm so excited to be a school librarian and to be able to talk to you about this, as a fellow newer-ish librarian. And then hopefully, maybe people will find me either on Bluesky or Instagram as a result of this. I'm just so excited to connect with more people and to do more of this kind of sharing. And, there's some tough stuff that's going on with libraries and things like that. So we need each other so that we can continue to lean into this work for all children and, and making sure that all kids, they feel seen and heard and represented. And so we got to lift each other up. Like librarians, Absolutely. We need each other.
So where are people going to find you online? Where do you want them to reach out to you?
Yeah. So I am most active on Instagram, and I am at Gwen Blumberg, GwenBlumberg. And I have hopped over to Bluesky, so I'm really just getting started there. So those are the two main places to find me. I have a link tree on both of those as well, with links to some things more, the things that are there more related to when I was a literacy coordinator, like a YouTube channel and some writing that I do for choice literacy, although I'm beginning to write from a librarian lens now. So Bluesky, and Instagram. And then, like I said, my link tree is there if you want to see any of the other stuff that I have been up to.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. I greatly appreciate your time and your sharing with us. And I'm glad that we got to have this conversation.
Yay! Thank you so much.
Thanks for checking out this episode of the SLLN podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes, which include not only a link to the lesson, but also links to the SLLN website, home to a curated list of free upcoming virtual events and resources for school librarians. It's easy to become a member of the network. Just visit the site and use what you like. If you have an idea, a question, or a lesson you want to share, you can email schoolliblearning@gmail.com. That's school, L-I-B, learning@gmail.com. Know someone with a great school library lesson? Let us know. Until next time, be safe, be good, and be well.